Hey, Internet, and welcome to this first episode of the tentatively named Neoncast, thus named because I'm lazy and uncreative and figured I would just call it that. The podcast where I just talk about stuff that interests me. I've been on many podcasts before. I've co-hosted a podcast, but I've never really had a chance to just, hit record and blather for a while, which, if any of you know me, know I'm quite fond of. So yeah, I'm just testing this out. I want to see if anybody cares or if I have fun doing it, if I can figure out stuff to talk about on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, something like that. And yeah, it's just going to be stuff that I notice, stuff that interests me. No politics, because I know I tend to talk politics a lot, like on Twitter and stuff. But there's going to be none of that here. It's mostly going to be about stuff that I actually like, because I do talk about politics a lot, but I do not like them. So yeah, I mean, I kind of have a topic to discuss today that I've been wanting to make some kind of video / thing about for a long time. But before we get to that, I guess I could always start by talking about the quote unquote news. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I'm going to figure out some kind of format eventually, but for instance, a story that grabbed my attention this week was the release of the 10 Cloverfield Lane trailer, which is apparently some kind of sequel or sort of sequel to Cloverfield, the 2008 J.J. Abrams movie. And the trailer is very mysterious. It was released with the Benghazi movie 13 Hours. And first there were leaked images on it. I say leaked and I'm doing air quotes because it was clearly a fake leak. You know, they do this now where like a cam version will go out on YouTube and it's clearly like super crisp and like way too high quality to be like a legit bootleg. I think this is like a new like viral marketing scheme where they're like, oh, we're going to pretend we're leaking a trailer and people are going to be excited because it's illicit or whatever. And the thing that tipped me off this was also the fact that it wasn't being pulled actively from YouTube. Like nobody was filing takedown notices for it. Whereas if something's legit leaked, it'll immediately get taken down. Like for instance, there was a Force Awakens visual effects reel video that also hit the internet this week. And Disney immediately pulled it from YouTube. Like there were millions of copies and it just got continuously pulled. I had to watch it on Daily Motion, which for some reason is better with hosting stuff that it's not supposed to host, I guess. Don't tell anyone though. So yeah, 10 Cloverfield Lane. I remember Cloverfield had a very involved sort of viral marketing campaign before it came out. It was all of these like mysterious videos. They opened a bunch of like fake MySpace pages. There was this whole sort of air of mystery about it. And here comes the sequel, I guess. Again, it's a little unclear whether or not this is a sequel or a movie that takes place in the same universe. It's clearly not the same kind of movie. It's not a found footage movie. And it stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's in, I don't know, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, I guess, and a bunch of other stuff, but that's kind of where I know and like her from. And John Goodman and some other guy with a beard. I'm sure maybe I'm supposed to know who that is, but I don't. And the trailer is very interesting. The movie was essentially made in secret. It's coming out in like a couple of months, and nobody knew. I mean, again, if you go back and read interviews with Mary Elizabeth Winstead and also with J.J. Abrams, like this project had different names, and it's not like nobody ever spoke of it. And as a friend of mine said, it's not like this is like $150 million gigantic like monster movie that they kept in silence. It's like a low budget movie. It seems to take place mostly in some kind of underground bunker or something like that. But yeah, I don't want to really say too much, but I know that it's not just that. I can't really go into the details on that. But I do happen to know that there is slightly more to it than that. That's all I'll say about that right now. But I'm excited. I don't know. Like, I see people groan at these J.J. Abrams things. I mean, he's not directing it. He's just producing it. The guy who directed it is, I don't remember his name. He made some like Portal fan film that was on the internet and got kind of notoriety from that. But people groan and they go like, oh, J.J. Abrams and his mysteries again. And, you know, that always leaves me scratching my head. There's two main complaints that I always hear about movies. Number one, Hollywood never does anything new. Number two, they always give everything away in the trailers. So as for number one, yeah, I guess technically this isn't a brand new thing. It's assuming for a second that it's a, you know, like a Cloverfield related project. It's an established universe, but again, it's a cinema original, fairly young franchise, not an established. It's not another, I don't know. It's not like Voltron. You know, Netflix just announced that they were going to reboot the Voltron anime. It's this newer, you know, I mean, I would feel comfortable enough calling it like an original. And the fact that they give away everything in the trailers, and I really like, that's one thing that I really appreciate about J.J. Abrams is I think he appreciates the value of like mystery and maybe going to watch a movie not knowing exactly what you're going to get. And frankly, some of my best experiences in cinema were under those kinds of circumstances, like Joss Whedon's Cabin in the Woods, which I went to see essentially blind because someone said to me, you really got to go see this. It's really not what it looks like from the trailers, even though the trailers did, if you pay close attention to a certain extent, give away a little bit of what happens later. But even that, when you actually sit down to watch that movie, from essentially the first minute, it's very clearly not what you thought it was going to be. And when I went to see it, there was a tremendously good atmosphere in the theater. The audience loved it. There were like gasps and cheers, and it was very cool. So yeah, I mean, I like that. I like the fact that all of a sudden this movie's coming out in like a couple of months. It's not like a year in advance. We get a trailer and another teaser and another TV spot, and you know, like take Dawn of Justice, where there's this big outcry about it revealing way too much in the trailers. I'm not entirely sure that that's as bad as people say. I have a feeling that it's a bit of a red herring, this whole doomsday. Is it doomsday or is it not doomsday? I have a feeling there's a little bit of misdirection going on here, but still, even if there is, I can't blame anybody. You know, like I don't hold it against anybody if they think the trailers for that are way too revealing. So yeah, 10 Cloverfield Lane. I don't know. Check out the trailer. It seemed kind of interesting to me. And yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Also, another movie I'm really looking forward to is Deadpool, which, I mean, it's going to be pretty impressive if Fox pulls this off. First of all, Fox and Marvel, not a huge history of success here. I mean, again, the X-Men movies as of late have been pretty good, but the fact that they you know, after fucking up the character of Deadpool royally already, seem to be on the right track to make it awesome, which, I mean, is definitely good. I think they have the right guy for it. I mean, I think the casting of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool originally was a really good idea. They just didn't know how to do it. And now they seem to know how to do it. I mean, and again, the fact that it's rated R is good, but that's not all of it. You know, like people consider R ratings like the be all end all. I mean, PG-13, you know, The Dark Knight is rated PG-13. It's not that you can't make something that's very adult without the R rating. But it also seems to have that kind of, you know, don't give a fuck attitude that I think is very Deadpool. It has a very cool promotional campaign. The recent crop of like posters that make it look like some kind of like drama, like a romantic drama, because it's coming out around like Valentine's Day. So they have these like posters that make it look like it's a, you know, like a love story about someone who has cancer and how his relationship copes with the fact that he's sick, which I thought was hilarious. So yeah, I'm pretty psyched about that. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I think it's, again, the whole R-rated thing, I think is very worth supporting. Like, I would be more inclined to go watch this in the theater just to help it make as much money as possible, because yes, I do think it's cool to have superhero-y movies and stuff that are R-rated, that are like specifically for adults. I really enjoyed the fact that both Daredevil and Jessica Jones, the Marvel shows on Netflix, were adult-oriented in that way. They were very violent. I was very surprised by how violent Daredevil was. And the language is raw, and I think that's cool, because I do think that there's been, I mean, ever since Burton's Batman, essentially, it's been understood that adults like this stuff. And especially, not only that adults, it's not just that adults who grew up on stuff like Batman as kids want to go see it as adults. There is an adult fan base for these properties, especially stuff like Batman, but also, Marvel, and also, stuff like Deadpool. And yeah, Daredevil. I mean, a lot of those comic books are really quite adult oriented. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really positive. So yeah, Deadpool. And I guess that ends this segment of what stuff I noticed this week. I mean, I'm sure every week I'm just gonna kind of find a thing or two that grabbed my attention. It might be anime, it might be movies. I mean, there are some anime stuff. There's some anime news from this week that I noticed, but nothing that's really worth talking about at this stage, because there isn't enough info yet. There's some kind of Gen Urobuchi project that he's helming at Nitro Plus, the first that he's done since Madoka Magica. If you don't know anime, you have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. But I'll take it one step further into the abstract. A very popular anime creator is helming his first project since the last time he did this, which was a really, really popular and really, really good show. Got it? All right. Moving right along. So, for this week's Neoncast, debut episode of the Neoncast, I thought I would do something that I've wanted to do for a long, long time, which is talk about Avatar. Now, before you hit the stop button and never, ever listen to this again, hear me out for a second. Why talk about Avatar? It's a movie nobody cares about and came out like almost a little more than 6 years ago. Well, for starters, it's been in the news recently for a couple of different reasons. One is obviously The Force Awakens and its gigantic success in the box office, which is obviously, compared to Avatar, the biggest grossing movie ever. So yeah, there have been a lot of comparisons. It's broken many, many Avatar records. It probably will not ever break its global 2.7 or whatever $billion gross. I read a whole article about it. It seems that Avatar was one of those perfect storms where just everything went really right for it. And it's going to be a little hard. Like I have a friend who's a bit of a numbers guy in terms of the movie industry, and he showed me how much better Avatar did in a bunch of foreign countries than Force Awakens does. I mean, look, Star Wars is hugely popular, but not everywhere, and it has a very rabid core fan base. But somehow Avatar kind of transcended that and became incredibly appealing just to regular people who aren't even into this kind of like science fiction and whatnot. And I mean, I remember that too, because I paid a lot of attention to Avatar before it came out. There was very interesting news about it. It was very cutting edge in terms of the technology. It was kind of groundbreaking in terms of the 3D and also in terms of the CGI. I mean, there was a lot of, and I'm very interested in like movie making technology and stuff like that. So it was very interesting to me. I'm also a big science fiction fan, and it was sold as this like an amazing like alien planet that's very well put together and very well researched and stuff like that. And it was not that, but we're going to get to that in a minute. So yeah, it's been in the news because of Star Wars, and also because James Cameron came out and said there's now been news about when the next ones are coming out. There's going to be a trilogy. There's going to be 3 sequels coming out in successive Decembers. I believe 2017 is the first one, and then 2018 and 2019, like around December, which is James Cameron's like a tentpole release date. Titanic came out mid-December. Avatar came out mid-December. So these will too, and they're going to be self-contained stories, but are going to also tell like a bigger... like there's going to be like a big story arc to all 3. Whether or not that's going to be good remains to be seen. But yeah, so like, once again, people are kind of talking about Avatar, and again, for years I've been wanting to do this. I mean, I've written about it on message boards and stuff, but I really wanted to kind of outline my whole theory about why this movie's terrible. And it's not for the reasons that you think. I mean, the fact that the plot of this movie is an incredibly simplistic Pocahontas, Dances with Wolves, The Last Samurai, a million movies did this, has been done to death. And the fact that the villains are very paper thin and the heroes are very paper thin, and it's very cheap in the ways that it makes you like the heroes and hate the villains. Again, it's been discussed to death, especially by people like Red Letter Media, whom I can never outdo. But the interesting thing is that the Red Letter Media review of Avatar never touched on the stuff that I'm going to outline, and probably had good reason to, because this is a little bit more inside baseball in terms of like science fiction and its fans. But yeah, I recently read an article. I couldn't find it. I was trying to look for it right now, just so I could give you the name of it, and I couldn't find it, about how unmemorable Avatar is. And the article said stuff like, "Can you name a character from Avatar? Because I certainly can't." And like you don't see like Na'vi cosplayers at conventions, and I mean it really didn't leave a mark on like pop culture and not even on geek culture, to the extent that much smaller movies did way better. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of impressive that a movie that did this well is this transient, whereas like it's this forgettable. I also think James Cameron made a big mistake by not hammering down sequels quickly. I'm not sure how well these sequels will do, because in the intervening years we got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and now Star Wars is coming, and Star Wars is going to have multiple threads going down it, because Episode 8 is coming out in mid 2017, but next year we have Rogue One. Presumably the standalone Star Wars movies are also going to be December releases, and December 2017, which is when Avatar 2 comes out, is also when Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One is supposed to be released. So it has very stiff competition. But yeah, very unmemorable. Quotes from it. Does anyone remember like Avatar quotes or stuff like that? Like I don't. And again, I'm a huge science fiction fan. But that's the main reason that I do not like Avatar. So I guess the thing I wanted to discuss right now is why Avatar is not a good science fiction movie. It's not a good movie, but again, the plot failings of it, quote unquote, exist in movies that are much more memorable and beloved. Because, I mean, look, Lord of the Rings is amazing. It's brilliant, and the movies are terrific. But it's not exactly like a complex and nuanced story. It's like the forces of good against the forces of evil. And the forces are evil because they're evil. And the forces of good are good because they're good. The villains don't have any motivation in Lord of the Rings, put it that way. Aside from like Sauron's quest for ultimate power, which is, again, just like a kind of a boring plot device. But the story is so rich and interesting and the movies were so well made and stuff that it doesn't even matter. Because again, there is a place, I think, in fiction for simple good versus evil stories. I mean, the original Star Wars is a bit like that. It's not like they kind of tried to introduce a little bit of like moral ambiguity and nuance later in like Empire and then also in Jedi. But to begin with, it's like, oh, these are the good guys and those are the bad guys. Space Nazis are the bad guys and the good guys are just good people. And, here is their clash. But the problem with Avatar is this. This would have been all forgivable to me if it was like the science fiction triumph that it was sold as. And it wasn't that at all. I remember how much time and effort they spent during the promotional campaign for this movie to stress that it was going to be this fantastical planet, and they did all this research. And again, James Cameron is kind of famous for really throwing himself at these projects like Titanic. He went down in a submersible to the Titanic, and then again, if you watch some of the behind-the-scenes stuff from Titanic, they recreated the stuff with like minute detail, and all the actors looked exactly like their historical counterparts and stuff. Like, he's very detail-oriented in that way, and he really wants to like go that extra mile to make it really, really sort of hefty. And there seems to have been that level of work put into Avatar, but the results are so incredibly bland that it's just, I can't believe it. Again, I read like D-level science fiction that's more imaginative and more interesting than Avatar easily. And again, as a science fiction fan, I'm a big science fiction fan. I read a lot of science fiction. The thing that appeals to me about it is this. If you write historical fiction or drama or thrillers or any other genre that takes place in our world, then all you need to do, again, I'm not minimizing this obviously, but I'm saying like your task is you need to make up a good story and good characters and then place them in our world. If you're a science fiction writer, you need to do all that, and you also need to create the world in which to set your characters, which is a task that, again, if you set a novel in like modern day United States, whatever, it's some love story that takes place in New York of today, you already have you know how this world functions. You know the rules, you know the laws, you know the look. You can pop up street view images of New York and use them as visual references to describe stuff in your book. Animals and people and events. You have this playground in which you can place your characters. If your story takes place on an alien planet 3,000 years in the future, you have to invent all that stuff. And you have to make it palatably real in order for it to not feel silly. And again, this is going to be a little hard to describe because it's this whole conceptual thing. But look for a second at Pandora, the Na'vi planet from Avatar. For a fantastical alien planet, it's like a student level effort in science fiction. Everything on Pandora is simply a take on something from Earth. Okay, it has alien birds, and it has alien dogs, and it has alien horses, and alien wolves, and alien rhinos, and alien butterflies, but they're all easily attributable to the terrestrial creature that they're kind of playing off of. So the Na'vi ride these horses. They're clearly horses, so they have 6 legs and they breathe through gills in their neck or whatever. But they're horses. Conversely, look at a bantha from Empire Strikes Back. That's not comparable to anything on Earth. It's its own thing. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why it's so memorable. That's why people remember the bantha and they don't remember the dumb 6-legged horse from Pandora. It's because it's just a horse, and the bantha is something interesting. I actually wrote down a couple of examples of this. Xenomorphs are really, really good example of something that's not like anything on Earth. It's its completely own unique creature, which makes it very memorable because when you see that thing, you're like, what the fuck is that? It's some kind of semi-human-y, it has the attributes of several different creatures kind of mashed together. It has something very reptilian about it. It has something very simian about it. It has something very canine almost. Like, it has all these different things, and it also has a bunch of stuff that's completely not Earth-like, like the texture of its skin, the fact that it has acid blood, the fact that it has a mouth inside its mouth, that kind of shit. Yeah, I already mentioned the banthas, but also something like the Sarlacc pit in Jedi, which is a weird, creature-y thing that's kind of, I don't know, how do you even define it? You can't, which is why it's memorable. Sandworms from Dune. Again, worms, I get that we have worms on Earth, and again, they're also called sandworms, or like the Tremors in the movie Tremors. But again, they're different enough, especially in terms of size, especially in Dune, because they're gigantic, to make them very, very distinct. The prawns in District 9, which again are called prawns, but don't actually look like prawns. I mean, they kind of look like them in the sense that, like, if you saw an alien like that, you would nickname it a prawn, but they're just these kind of wiry, buggy looking things. And again, far more distinct in their kind of look. Even something like E.T., which is, again, a quote-unquote humanoid alien, is non-humanoid enough so that, you could look at a silhouette of E.T. and say that's E.T. You know what I mean? Like, the Atari 2600 E.T. game has a sprite that's like, one flat pixelated color, and it still looks exactly like E.T. because that shape is so unique. One last one, the movie The Abyss, which ironically enough is a James Cameron movie and has some kind of weird water-based creature, something like that. It's like a snake thing of water that can mimic what you look like. Again, it's weird and interesting, and you're like, I've never seen anything like this before. None of us have never seen anything like anything on Pandora, which is a weird, like, double negative sentence. But my point is, like, we've seen that all before. The Na'vi just look like kind of cattish, blue cat kind of people. And the plants are it's all very blue-green. The sky's blue. The plants are all green. It has, like, this kind of glowy, trippy thing at night, which, again, I kind of liked. Look, I'm not going to say that nothing about it is interesting or visually appealing, especially on the technical level. It's really well done. The CGI in some points is indistinguishable from real shots. The 3D is brilliant, and I know a lot of people don't like 3D, but I remember paying specific attention to the 3D in that movie and the way a lot of the shots were composed and a lot of the sets were constructed. It was done in a way to kind of lend itself to 3D, and it was also lit properly and colored properly, because 3D needs to be brighter and more saturated because the polarized 3D glasses kind of dim a little bit the images. So in that sense, it was really well done. But again, I kept waiting for something to pop up on screen and for me to go, what is that? And that moment never came. And that's not all. It's not just on that an imaginative level in terms of creation of things. If you take the Na'vi, for instance, not only are they're very unoriginal. I mean, they're essentially a carbon copy of like ancient Earth cultures, warrior cultures, African warriors, Native American warriors. It's sort of it has like the matriarchal kind of structure. And again, I mean that in the anthropological sense, not in the political sense. Like, the chief of the tribe is the man and the woman is like the shaman or whatever. It's very, very derivative of Earth culture. Down to like the way they kind of look. They have the beads and the headdresses and the face paint. And aside from being derivative, it also makes no sense in its own world, because the movie takes great effort to explaining to you that the Na'vi live in harmony with their world, and they're very peaceful, and they live sort of, in symbiosis, however that's pronounced, with their planet, and yet they're a warrior culture. That makes no sense. And so I guess someone will say, like, no, but they're hunters. They go and they hunt. But there's a big difference between a society of hunters and a society of warriors. Hunting is about stealth and quiet and camouflage. The Na'vi wear garish war paint and ride horses with war cries. Like, clearly, this is a society that evolved in, like, intertribal warfare. Like, if you look at Native Americans and their war cries and their war paint, Maasai warriors in Africa, which very much remind me of the Na'vi. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a bunch of Maasai warrior pictures up on the walls in their concept art room. It doesn't make sense. How can if a society is completely peaceful and in complete symbiosis and their race is this harmonious thing that's supposed to juxtapose how awful humanity is, they should have made them essentially inept in warfare instead of being like, lethal hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that. That was really weird to me. And also, it had stuff like, there were a lot of touches like that where it almost, it couldn't decide whether it was going for like a very, very sort of logical, well thought out alien environment, or whether it was going for like a fairy tale-y kind of thing. Because, if you look at Star Wars, it is very fairy tale-ish. Like, a lot of stuff in Star Wars makes zero sense at all. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that an X-Wing can fly interplanetary distances, interstellar distances, I mean. It doesn't matter that, like, a Death Star is a completely impractical thing. And all that stuff doesn't matter at all, because the point of it is that it's like this, it's like a fantasy epic just set in space. Avatar kind of tries to play both worlds. It tries to be this, like, very science-based, very sort of technologically driven and rooted in real science kind of story. But then it has floating mountains, and again, I understand that they made this kind of, they tried to kind of explain it in scientific terms, but it failed completely. And again, I don't mind floating mountains, but it comes across as very odd if you, like I said, if you try to do both. Like, if you look at a movie like The Martian, which is a movie that's conceptually, a book and movie, conceptually based in like very proper science. Like, if all of a sudden Matt Damon developed magical powers in that, in that movie towards the end or whatever, it would be very, very jarring. Whereas if the movie originally was about magical powers, then it wouldn't be. Like, it's tonally odd. It's tonally off. And like, they have like the biological version of USB where they plug into the animals and stuff. I mean, that wasn't terrible. It was a little too on the nose, in my opinion. And again, I promised that I wouldn't go into the, I wouldn't really go into the story and how the story is very simplistic and very preachy, which again, I really hate preachy stories. But that kind of ties into that a little bit. It's just a little too on the nose. So yeah, overall, I feel like, any day of the week, any random pulp science fiction novel that I'm reading at any given time is far more interesting and far more original and far more sort of well thought out than, anything in Avatar, which is surprising, again, considering how popular it was, how much money it made, but is, I think, somewhat confirmed in how poorly it survives in our collective memories. Because again, you will see no Na'vi cosplayers, and you will see nobody really references it. It doesn't survive in the, I mean, just look at the memes that erupted over a throwaway character in The Force Awakens that's on screen for like, I don't know, 30 seconds and is just a random stormtrooper with a melee weapon, which I have dubbed the Jedi Nightstick. people loved that, and it was just a random throwaway thing. And Avatar has this like super worked on, and like, think of all the people who sat around and designed this stuff and wrote it and rewrote it and conceptualized it, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's pretty impressive. A pretty impressive failure, I would say. And again, I'm sure James Cameron is crying on top of his gigantic mountain of money. But whatever. I mean, Justin Bieber makes a lot of money too. That doesn't mean he's a better artist than, bands that created amazing music and toiled in anonymity. I mean, Van Gogh didn't sell a single painting his entire life, and now he's considered a genius. So I wouldn't measure success. Again, it was successful and good for him. And again, unlike George Lucas as of late, James Cameron is not someone who I'm bothered by his success. He's made enough good things, and he's continuing along this line. Like, I do have a certain level of hope for the future of Avatar. Maybe a fool's hope, but you could always get away with saying, like, this was just the introduction to this kind of universe. So yeah, the story was kind of dumb and kind of simplistic. And now that everything is in place, we can get to the meat of this world. And again, if that's what happens, I'll be happy. I have no stake in having this fail. Like, I'm always rooting for stuff to succeed in the genres that I enjoy, because it just means more of it, and and more talent, and more younger creators with distinct voices lending their talents to these genres and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess that's essentially all I have to say about Avatar. And it's interesting, like I said, I've been wanting to get this shit off my chest for years, and I guess finally I have. And I guess that's going to be the end of the first Neoncast. As I said, I'm gonna kind of toy with the format of this. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. It depends. I don't know. I think I'm gonna put this up on YouTube, and then if people comment on it, or if people tweet me at Neon Taster with comments or suggestions, or I don't know, stuff of that nature, then maybe I'll follow through with that. So yeah, check me out. I'll be tweeting this later when I post it. And thanks for listening, if you have been listening. And if you haven't been listening, then why am I talking to you? Yeah. Well, anyway, see ya later.